So like you can tell that I'm just
Just the arrows, yeah.
Good
afternoon, everybody. We're all ready for the last leg of the conference. I'd like to just sort of send my congratulations to the committee for a fabulously organised event, and also to all of you being so motivated for being here, first at the weekend, but also so early into your careers, because as a medical student, and probably up to year 4 or 5, I probably only really saw the inside of the bar. So I think you're doing amazingly well. I'm Mel Jenkins. I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon, well, mainly thoracic surgeon from St George's, and I'm going to be talking about how to build your surgical CV and portfolio. And what I will say is, initially, do some of these things, but I also want you to go and have fun and enjoy all the other things that are going on at medicine. Okay, so it's not all about yeah. So I based this talk mainly on core surgical training and the applications, because kind of that's where you want to be headed for eventually. This is something I knew nothing about at your stage, and I think this guy is all ahead of the game by doing this. I think it's a bit sad that they're trying to shoehorn you into these career pathways at this stage, and I think, like we've said in some of the other talks, please keep your options open. It's obviously you want to be surgeons, or you think you want to be surgeons, so that's why you're here. But do look at all the different specialties, don't sort of fixate on one, because you might find along the way that something really catches your eye and you really love it. So unfortunately, you do have to look at the core surgical training application to sort of channel what you need to do for that process. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, and how you use those points for that and the domains that they've got for the core surgical training to enhance your CV and portfolio. I sort of, as an aside, actually recruit for the specialty training, so it's sort of a grade above that. So I know something of this, but more so the specialty training. And I see the matrix that they sort of put out for everybody each year for all the different specialties, and I think, wow, these guys are really amazing. They're ticking boxes for this, and they're really amazing. So Health Education England, it might not be a term you're familiar with yet, but you will come to know and slightly love. They're the overseeing body that makes sure that we have an objective and standardised process for your surgical training applications. And what that means is they are trying to have a point scoring system, essentially, so that everybody is looked at objectively. There's, they're taking the subjective elements out of it. That consultant back in the day, they could have a word with somebody and then that would get you an interview. It doesn't work like that these days. So there is a process of self-assessment scoring and evidence verification, and you have to upload this to their website, Oriel, to do that before you get shortlisted and interviewed. And they have changed it slightly now, because they have got an exam assessment that they want people to do, a bit like the GPs do in the process of actually getting to that point. But I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the 5 domains that you can actually build upon and enhance to get through that, because obviously there's going to be other things that you want to show that you've got all the basic criteria that are making you eligible to actually apply, but these are sort of the added extras, and that's where you want to be scoring the points. So the 5 domains, we'll go through each one. They want to see that you're demonstrating commitment to your surgical specialty. So everybody always talks about operative experience, and I think everybody always thought, the more you have, the better it is. But actually, they've changed it slightly this year, and I think it's only up to about 40 procedures that you've been involved with that will score you the maximum points. It's a little bit sad, because some people, spend their lives, their spare time in theatre, and they do so much and gain so much as a medical student. Or even as an FY1 and FY2. But what I would say to you is how you can take this forward is, at this stage, if you are starting to go to theatre, get yourself a logbook, okay? Not with patient numbers and details, things like that, but just the operation, the date you went, who the surgeon was, what you did. Maybe they let you scrub, maybe they let you hold a retractor. At this stage, that's really good. But they might even do other things. I let my medical students, once we get to know them, they close the wounds for us. We have some, multiple wounds, because we do keyhole surgery. It's all little wounds that you can practice on this size, but we also do the massive thoracostomy wounds. If you get them to do that as a medical student, that's brilliant, yeah? So we want you to sort of start doing basics so that you get your surgical skills up to scratch. I know there are surgical skills courses that you guys have open to you, and I would encourage you to do those as well. But the operative experience, get a logbook, okay? And that includes the procedures you might do on the wards. If it's a chest drain you've done with your registrar, you know, cannulation, bloods, all that sort of thing. Write it all down, make a note of it. Attendance of surgical conferences, well, you all are. That's a tick in the box, isn't it, already? This is one thing you can do. You've heard of ACIS as well, the Association of Surgeons in Training, can't say that. They do conferences which are very relevant to you guys and other trainees as well, at different levels. But equally, find out from the different specialties from their website, and I will put some websites up at the end, how you can get involved as a student and attend them. It's quite often free for students, and my particular society, Cardiothoracic Society, we have a forum for students. So actually, you can go to the university day, it's coming up next weekend actually in Birmingham, if anybody wants to go. And you would register for it. The university is fantastic in terms of knowledge. We all go, we love going to that because it's all our colleagues who are teaching us about things that we may not be up to speed with, all the new technologies and things like that. But equally, they've got student forum over the other 2 days, and you can actually present papers and posters at that, and there's medals and prizes, and it's purely aimed at the students at that level. You can equally go to the other forums as well, but you might find that the student one is more relevant to you, and it's very useful, and it wins you points on the CV. Now, surgical experience. You will all have surgical attachments, and you may have special study modules at your various medical schools. We have them at George's in the sense that you can organise your own sort of module for 6 weeks at a time. There's 2 of them, one earlier on in the career and one later on in the career. And you basically go and find a specialty that you like, and you ask to spend those 6 weeks with them, and you do a project. And we have people come to us all the time because it means that they get a bit more time in theatre, they'll hopefully enhance their surgical skills and learn a bit more about that particular specialty. But it's just sort of generally being with a surgeon and with the surgical team and knowing things. You have to have done these clinical attachments for about 4 weeks for it to count. But I think most centres, most med schools do allow you to do that. And equally, if you don't have the opportunity, you still have holidays, and you know, come along in the summer holidays, the Christmas holidays, whatever, if you want to do that to enhance that part of your CV. Okay. So moving on to quality improvement and clinical audit, everybody groans at this, don't they? You can do this very easily. If you are a willing medical student and you go along to your surgical department and say, have you got any projects? They'll sort of scratch their heads, but actually there will probably be loads of things that they haven't thought of, and it will be the basic stuff that we audit all the time, like lead prophylaxis. Are the post-op patients getting the right dose of doltaparin? Are they wearing their surgical stockings? You know, who gets surgical wounds? Who's having the right painkillers? You know, all these sorts of things, and they're basic things that are really applicable. I was asked earlier today about how the students would get a specific surgical specialty projects, and I said, well, you don't actually have to do that for this sort of thing, because if it's something to do with surgery, it is applicable to pretty much every specialty. And so therefore, if you tweak it and you put the right spin on it, you will get the points. What is important though, that if you do take up a quality improvement project or an audit, that you actually try and close that loop, and that's something you could do maybe with a friend. So if you do 2 projects, one of you can be the first author and the other one first author and the other. It just means that the 2 of you can both do those audits, look at them, then go back, revisit and see whether the improvement has been made. Yeah. So things that you can do very easily within your surgical departments. Now, the next domain that they have for the applications are your presentations and publications. They don't sort of talk about prizes and such anymore, and there used to be a category 4 prizes at full surgical training, but they don't actually list it. What they do list, though, the maximum points would be prizes for oral presentations. That comes back to finding out about your specific specialty that you want to get involved with. And as I say, making sure that you're actually sending in sort of papers or anything like that to their particular conference that they're having. Cardiothoracics, as I say, is very receptive to that. I know some of the other specialties are as well, but it might not just be this. It might be the Royal Society of Medicine. And I don't know how you guys are, well, most of you are probably from London, but I used to go there as a student. They do some really exciting talks, and I think it's something that if you can manage to do, you don't have to pay too much money for the membership. And I think actually you don't have to be a member to attend all the talks, but you can get involved like that, and you can also submit presentations relevant to that specialty. So, for instance, they have a cardiothoracic section, they've got a general surgery section, they've got a vascular section. So, you know, find out about it, do some research, and then you can maybe put in for an oral presentation and possibly even win a prize for it. It'd be brilliant. If you can be a first author, obviously that scores you prizes and points. And also, if you've written any books, any budding writers out here, any book chapters that you may have contributed to. And obviously other presentations which get you slightly less points but equally as important are things like regional and local meetings. And that could be as simple as, you know, finding out some data for your local, I don't know, plastics department or ENT department, for instance, and then they invite you back to their clinical governance meeting, which is normally run once a month. And you present it to the department. That is a local or regional meeting, okay? So that brings you prizes and points too. So moving on, teaching experience is important because as a doctor, you are not just somebody who obviously sees patients, treats patients, and basically forms a management plan for them. You're also teaching all the time. And you're not just teaching your patients about their disease process and educating them, but you're also teaching your peers and you're teaching the people that are coming up behind you, your medical colleagues. Or even trainees, and I think that's important to recognise that and remember that you are a teacher as well in this role. Organised teaching sessions would be brilliant if you can do that, and you can do that within your maybe department. You could sort of say, well, can I organise this for say the trainees, or have the trainees organise something like that? It could be as simple as saying, well, we're going to have a sort of review of this particular topic in surgery. We would like to borrow one of our you know, registrars to come and do it with me, and you organise a teaching session, and it could be like a hands-on, a surgical skills workshop or something. You borrow the lab at your med school, you bring a couple of doctors from, you know, your local team, and Bob's your uncle. You've got a few people to do it. You've organised a teaching session. It might be that it's more involved with that. You might be going for, you know, the big prizes, and you might actually sort of say, well, actually, I'm going to get very involved in organising teaching sessions with, say, one of the societies. As I said to you, cardiothoracics, the society there is very receptive to students. We've got our own student department and forum, and they regularly organise teaching sessions and teaching days for students, and some of our students are on that panel and they get involved in doing that and organising, much like the guys here have organised the conference today. You will, as I say, be always teaching other people, so not just your patients and your peers, but other healthcare workers as well. You're talking about your nursing staff, your physios, people like that. It might be that you sort of say, well, actually, I'm going to organise a teaching session on, say, post-operative wound care for, you know, the nursing staff on this ward, and you organise it, and you've got something that's put down as a teaching experience. And then other experiences, because at the end of the day, you're not just medics, you probably do other things. There's probably lots of you who are very talented musicians, or maybe teach maths or something else to students who are doing GCSEs or A-levels. I've known lots of medical students to do that over my time. And if that is your teaching experience, then don't forget about it, because that is also really important. Now, the last domain that they talk about are training qualifications, and this is to do with medical education mainly. I put the word PhD on there because there are going to be some students that come from a background of having done research. And if they've done research, although it's not medical education, they have to look at what they've done, because actually when you are in research, quite often you are training other people as well. It's something that you can look into your own qualification and see whether that also applies. But in the main, so it's masters or postgraduate certificates or diplomas of medical education. These are getting a lot more popular. You can do them online. You can do them quite easily in your own time. It doesn't have to take time out. And I think they don't have to be that expensive these days either. But it's something to look at, and something that, again, will get you some more points in the CV application process. So how can you improve your CV? I think the first thing I'd like to say is just do lots, okay? Have extracurricular activities. It makes you more interesting. It makes you look like you can juggle lots of balls and you can maintain lots of things in your life without everything coming crashing down. And it also gives you some life experience. So the more you do with other people, the better you are going to be as communicators, yeah? It gives you the opportunity to have roles and responsibilities. So it might be that, say, you get involved in your local community project that, you know, helps kids on a, I don't know, Friday night with football, something like that. It could be anything. But if you've got a role of responsibility, that is also going to add weight to your CV. Yeah. We talked about logbooks already. Surgical courses is another one, and they don't specifically give particular points for this, but it does come up and it does gain you ground when you're doing the interview, because it might be a question that they'll ask. They might say, what surgical courses have you been on? And it might be surgical skills courses. It might be sort of an introduction to, say, cardiothoracic surgery. Sorry, I keep going back to cardiothoracics, but it's my specialty and we do it very well in terms of student engagement. And also the as I've mentioned. Surgery taster days, they again are run by different surgical specialties, and obviously the clinical attachments go to your local surgery department and say, I really need to have some time with you. Can I spend a couple of weeks over this holiday just being with your team? And they're not going to say no. So just find out who they are, get their email, make friends with them. Yeah, it's really helpful. The surgeons will also be able to help you with submitting abstracts and posters. And actually, when you have a willing medical student to help you with that, it's really, really helpful. And so the juniors who might feel a bit overwhelmed with work and things like that, and they've got all this stuff to do, if you, as at this level, want to do that, when you get to their level, you'll look back and go, gosh, I hope I get some good medical students to come and help me with these projects. Because it is really useful. And then you guys at this stage will get your name on papers. You don't have to do it all now, but if you start building these little steps and these bricks up now, you're going to build up a fantastic portfolio. And likewise with audits and projects within the department. For you guys, this is a slide of, these are probably the 4 that I found that are most student friendly. As I say, cardiothoracic surgery, we've been a long time sort of engaging students. We've had the student forum at our conference for several years now, and we do taster days, we do taster weekends. They run around the country. So the last one was in Hull. I think we had one at Bath a couple of years ago. I talked at that. I don't know if you guys can be young for that. But we hold them around the country. We try and move them up and down the country because it's a bit unfair to hold them all in the southeast. But there's all these sorts of things, and there's a mentoring scheme as well with the Society of Cardiothoracic Surgeons. So have a look on the website and find the student bit and have a look at all the stuff that's on offer there, okay? Because there's also like bursaries and fellowships and things like that that you can apply for. Equally with the plastic surgeons, they've got fellowships and grants and bursaries, so that's always a good thing, because it might be that, say, you want to do your clinical attachment somewhere else completely different, but actually it's going to cost quite a lot of money to stay there or do something there. So that might be something that you might want to think of. And equally, the British Orthopaedic Association and the Vascular Surgery Society are all equally open to students as well. So they're the 4 that, as I said, I found probably most student friendly and had student engagement parts on their websites. Have a look at the others, and as I say, go and find your surgeons. And if there's a particular surgical specialty that you really, really love, get in touch with them and talk to them about it. Okay. So I'm going to start the questions. So we'll open up the floor to the questions. Any questions? Right, who's got the mic? Okay. I can't hear you. You want this one?
Thank you for your talk. I'm a second year medical student, so I'm still kind of new to this, but I just wanted to ask, how long do you have to build your portfolio? Do you have until 5th year, 6th year, or until your second foundation year? Like how long?
You're always building your portfolio. I think even when you are in your training years, you're still building it because there's always something else that you will then try to achieve or apply for. Obviously, with core surgical training, you get to your foundation years, and that's at that point that you're making the applications. But if you're starting now, you're starting really early, which is amazing. Okay, so just little and often, that's all you have to do. But as I say, do it consistently. And you know, you have that time until you get to the point when you're actually applying for core surgical training. Some people take a foundation year 3 as well because they're not quite sure what they want to do, and we've had a few of our FY2s either stay on with us or actually go somewhere else just to get some more experience because they weren't quite sure whether to say they wanted to do anesthetics or they want, you know. So you do have time. It feels like the clock is ticking and that, you know, you're going to run out of time, but really you won't. And actually, if you're doing it consistently as you go along, you will find that you build up that CV quite quickly.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else got a question? There's one over there.
Hi, sorry, my name is Kiran. I'm a medical student actually from Hungary, and I'm very proud elected on the final year medical student, and I'm graduating in a couple of months. And back in Hungary, where the EU system is to be obliged to take thesis as medical students by the end of 6th year. I was just wondering if those actually like training modifications.
I missed the last bit. Sorry, say that again.
Doing thesis.
Oh, thesis.
Any thesis, if you counted as training qualifications or something.
So what I would say is, if it's a thesis that is a research project and you've actually maybe got a publication from it, you can certainly score it as points for something. I'm sure you will find somewhere in one of these domains that you can score for. The key element for this is that you can't double score. So if you have projects that you want to count as, say, a research thing, and it might have been a paper that you've written, you can score it for that, but not necessarily for something else in one of the other domains. What I would do is I would look at the points, because they give you how much each thing is worth if you look at the website, and it tells you, and you might just go for the one that's more points, basically. Yeah, does that answer your question?
But my thesis actually about research literature history.
Okay.
So I don't know exactly how the but I think we may share it online.
Yeah, I think a literature review, I mean, is it something that could be, you know, a review that you might want to send somewhere and have the, you know, an online journal or something like that? Is it something that could be done that way?
Well, I think I can, because it's done with the Department of Surgery.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
I would explore your options, because if you put a lot of work into it, then you should try and get something else out of it other than just, I've got a thesis for it. It's nice to say, you know what, I got this from it as well. There are lots of online publications these days that you can actually have these things published in. There are the paid for ones as well as the ones that you would just offer and they accept. Obviously, the paid for ones are seen slightly less favourably, but if you can get it published somewhere, and it might be somewhere local as well, it might not just be, you know, an online publication. It might be that, you know, you do it within your local, you know, surgical magazine or whatever they have locally to you. Yeah.
thank you so much.
I don't know what it is as well. You could also submit it through conference and a presentation. That would be a point as well. Okay, then I have some question.
Some over here, you know.
Yeah, thank you for your talk. I was just wondering what the pros and cons of doing a PhD are, if you would recommend doing one.
Oh, the age-old question. So, does everybody think that a surgeon should have a PhD? Should. I think it's a very personal thing as to whether you like research or not. I actually came from a degree background, and I decided I didn't want to go into further research. I wanted to do medicine. So I'm a graduate when I entered medicine. But there are some people who are very good at research, and actually PhD suits them very well. I think there are always pros and cons to it, and you can probably argue it one way or the other. Obviously, the pros are you've studied that particular topic, that area in great deal of detail. It makes you probably a super specialist in that area, particularly if it does relate to the type of surgical specialty that you're going into. For example, in cardiothoracic, I've got a very good friend who has developed cardioplegia as part of his PhD many years back, and you know that's what he does. And cardioplegia is the thing that keeps the patient alive when they're on bypass in cardiac surgery. So you know, if it relates to that and it is that good, then fantastic. The cons of the PhD are it is another 3 years. I mean, one could argue that you are actually studying for a long time, and actually another 3 years is not going to make or break it. You know, it's fine. But what it can do is change the year that you finish your training. And depending on how that goes and how many people are finishing at the same time, that can also change the job situation for you. So it means that you might stay hanging around for jobs. Or equally, you might come out in a year where there's a deficit of surgeons in that particular specialty, and suddenly there's loads of jobs, and you're like, well, hey, I'm so glad I did my PhD because it put me back. And actually, I've come out when there's lots of jobs available, and I've got the pick of them rather than waiting around for one. So there are pros and cons to both. And I think what you've got to ask yourself is whether you feel engaged enough to study that particular specialty or area for a PhD. I mean, normally you started with an MD anyway, and you could stop at that point. You don't have to go on to the PhD. The vast majority of people, if they've got the funding, they will go on to it. But again, you will have to probably supplement your income with something else while you're doing your PhD, like maybe on calls and things like that, just to help you. So lots of pros and cons. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I know people that have done both. I'm not the research person that has done it, but you know, there are people that have enjoyed it and have done very well with it.
Great, thank you.
Ladies.
I was just wondering for the commitment to surgical specialties and like the surgeries as well as the experience of the at least being 4 weeks. I was wondering if the country where you get the experience from, does it impact that any way?
The country that you get it from? No, because you have to be signed off, I believe, by whoever you have, been shadowing or attached to, who is your mentor. So they should be recognised as, a surgeon who can be a mentor to people. So it should impact that. If you can get it in a different country, brilliant. That's really great. But equally, it's very easy to organise at home, and we get some of our home students doing it, I would say, over their holidays, but it shouldn't impact on that. I think it's important that you've just got the right documents to sign and say that you've had them, because obviously you've got everything that you have here, you have to show evidence, and that's part of the evidence verification process that we go through when we're shortlisting as well. Okay, so if you've got something, you're saying you've done it, and you've got the t-shirt, essentially, you've got to show the t-shirt. So show them the certification and the letters of recommendation from the people that you've done that with.
Hi. Yeah, no, thank you so much for your talk. Some really great tips. So you mentioned doing research from a young age, obviously very good, getting involved, abstracts, posters. My question is, does the research you do, is it better if it's in the specialty you want to apply for, or can it just be any research in general which is useful for your application?
I think the right answer to that is that if you have done it and it is applicable, then it will be fine. Okay? Because ultimately, you may decide at this stage, oh my God, I really, really want to be a cardiothoracic surgeon. And actually, you get through a couple of years and you go, you know what? I actually much prefer vascular. So you change tack and you do something else. As long as it's relatable, as long as it's something else that relates to that surgical specialty, it will be absolutely fine. Obviously, if you carry on that trajectory and you're doing that, then brilliant. It's showing your dedication and commitment right from the word go. I'm very impressed with any of you who already know what you want to do. Exciting at this stage. But if you can get a project and that surgical specialty, then fantastic. We've had students come through with us, and because they've been really great and motivated, they've put posts in and they submitted stuff for our conference and actually presented. And I've had quite a few students that have done that, but actually they're probably not going to end up as surgeons. They're going to go into a medical specialty or anaesthetic or something like that. But it still holds true for them and for their core training program, because they're trying to basically marry up how all the core trainees get assessed, essentially, whether it's GP, surgery, medicine. It's all in alignment now, and that's what they want to do. So it should also transfer over. Obviously, if it isn't that specialty, brilliant, but you might change your mind. You're going to have to change your mind.
Well, I was just wondering how beneficial is meditation? How beneficial is meditation?
Right. You might be able to answer this because you're newer than I am. When I was at med school, it was not something you had to do, and I know now that some of the med schools make you do interstation. George's is not one of them. I think it's still optional, but there are some places that do. Subsequently, because it has become one of those things that everybody does, when you get to the surgical training program for the higher specialties, they don't actually score you for an intercalated degree, which I don't think is very fair, because you have taken a year out, you have done, special research, and have taken your time and effort to do that, and also money, because hey, it's an extra year of training and studying and funds, but it's not recognised. So I would say, I think it's good if you have a particular interest in a surgical specialty and you know that there is something that is related to that. So, vascular surgery, for instance, you know that there's going to be something with the vascular surgeon that comes up, and you can do an integrated degree related to cardiovascular diseases. Brilliant. Same with like neurosurgery. You do a neurology project or get your integrated degree related to neuroscience or something like that, then I think absolutely, then that's going to look really great for your commitment. But in terms of point scoring, actually they don't actually point score for it when you get to the higher surgical specialties. So it's hard to say the importance of it at the moment. I think it demonstrates commitment, certainly. And I think if it's something that you feel very strongly about, then yes, do. But I don't think it's something you have to do.
Can I just add, if we did an invitation as a master's, would that count?
A master's will probably count, yes, and it would points. Yeah, and certainly at the higher surgical training, you get more points definitely for that.
Hi there, so I go to Southampton with me, and in our third year, the first term of it is a research project, and at the end of it, we get a BMed side. So what I was wondering was, would that come under like a training qualification, or my project's on like research into medical education, so would that count as research? It's not anything to do with surgery.
If it was purely to do with medical education, I think it probably would, yes. If you did that and you could just try and wangle it, that you could get some sort of other qualification with it, like a certificate with that in a PG cert for medical education, that would be brilliant, because then it would be hopefully not more work, but you would get that qualification for the same thing that you were doing in the same project. But they are quite strict about the training qualifications related to medical education.
Thank you. BMed side doesn't count anymore for foundation training as a degree. So if you can get a paper out of it, try and do that instead.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you take some years out of medical training, that
it shouldn't do. The reason being is it depends what the specialty is like when you get to higher surgical training. We have a certain amount of time if you're applying for specialty training in cardiothoracics that you can't do a certain amount of time, and they want us to 18 months at max in cardiothoracics. So I think what you've got to do is make it count in, say, a surgical specialty, but it doesn't have to be some cardiothoracics, for instance. You would probably have to explore that with the different specialties. I think at core surgical training, Is there a cut-off point now for the amount of time you spend doing surgery before you?
There is, but I think it's not, doesn't really affect it. For registrar training, they've
Yeah.
left 3 years.
It's a bit for the core surgical training. I don't think it matters because it never used to matter. But they've changed a few things. But I still don't think they've got a time limit on it. So it shouldn't affect just the core surgical training. But you've got to watch out for your higher surgical training and see, you know, if it's that particular surgery, you haven't overstepped that time limit. Because then you might be eligible to actually apply for it.
What they do is they just divide your points because they expect you to have more to show for the time that you spent.
Well, for cardiothoracic, they're discounted.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's me.
Right, so we're going to take one or two more.
Hi, thank you for the talk. You talked about how surgical experience is quite important in surgical points. How is surgical experience measured in the hours in theatre or different hours?
They're actually quite non-specific. So it's the number of cases that you are involved in, and like the cut-off point when I was reading about it was about 40. So actually, it's quite low to get the maximum amount of points. You know, if you always think more was better. So you'd be like, oh, I've been, assisting, or I've been to theatre, hundreds of times, etc., etc. It doesn't mean that anymore. But I think what is important is if you do more, then that's great, because I think it's better for you all round clinically and gives you surgical experience. But have a look at the cut-off points and the point system, how they score it, because it does say it quite well on the HME website.
Thank you.
Right, and we'll do one next.
So I'm a surgeon student, and I'm just thinking about the screen that I'm hoping to go back to UCL. So I was doing this around the small products, just get an idea of that. I'm thinking, what is the criteria for research to be considered accredited or published? Do you need all these resources at your disposal, or if it's just a group of fellow colleagues who are really solid and actually doing well?
I think you need to find somebody who will mentor you for the project, and they should have a reasonable plan in mind they want you to achieve. You've only got limited time as well, because you'll probably need access to the library, online, journals, things like that, so you can actually do in the background reading. If it is the clinical project and they want you to collect data, obviously you'll have to be in the hospital to do that within the department and have access to that as well. Probably be requiring to be one of the doctors, when you're doing that. But in terms of the actual criteria, they don't actually state, it has to be this. They just talk about whether it's been published, whether you're a first author or second author or part of authors, where it's published, whether it's from a major applications that we have, whether it's online, whether it's local or regional meeting, something like that. So in terms of the actual research itself, I would basically be guided by your mentor just to say, well, what are we hoping to achieve with this? Is this something that I can do in these 4 or 6 weeks, whatever I've got in the time of you, but then we can take it forward and facilitate with you, once we tweet it and bring it up and package it. Can we send it on to, one of the big journals somewhere else, or can we send it to a board site and let's, find out what their plan is.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Thank you very much. Let's see what our program. And now again, before that, let's also give a round of applause to Gian and Billy who being probably from the and finally for me as well, for being here and from for support this event. Please come along next year, or push your friends to come along next year. Some of our brilliant workshop people will be organizing next year. So please come along. It's a fantastic event and we're hoping to go attendance. Now if you want to go to LP1, not for the one, not go to for network events, say Dubai, having some champagne and wine at the same time. Those are alcoholic options, don't worry, and juices. And thank you very much. You will have conference feedback form that will be sending you picking up the certificate, and I will be coming over the next couple of days and weeks.
Question. Order. I get confused with their place in the new assembly.
Yeah.
How that works.
It's basically you're doing the audit again, because the audit is you're looking at your clinical practice and you're seeing it against the standard and comparing it and saying, do we meet those standards? Are we following what the protocol is, whether it's the national guidelines or the hospital protocol? And you're looking at what you're actually doing. When you do that, you collect data, you analyze it, and we say, well, actually, yeah, we're about 65%, 70%, you know, compliant. How can we improve that? You make those changes, and you look at it again.
As a
So
medical
that's
student,
the-
we've suggested you do
do it with your team. So you say, well, you know, we've got this many patients going down to theatre, but only 90% of the 100% are wearing their tent stockings. Why is that? And then you look at it and you're like, well, actually, those 10%, they're on a shift when you have first they didn't work, or actually they ran out that day, or they're coming up forwards and nobody knows how to put them on. It's that sort of thing. So you can do that, and the changes you're implementing are how are we going to change that so that we actually get that compliance on to 100%. And you could say, well, actually, and this is where you can, because you can say, well, I've suggested that we try and make sure that the patients will say more, the nurses are educated, you know, the patients are educated about it in their pre-assessment, they know that they're meant to wear these stockings, so even if they don't get given a pair, they ask, that sort of thing, and then you re-audit it. So yes.
But how does that compare to quality improvement? Because that's a different
It's the
thing.
same.
Oh, is it the same?
Audit is quality.
Because I've done one in the past, it's like implementing stickers rather than written consent. And I'm wondering, can I like
It's the same
follow
thing,
that
it's
up?
just a process. Audit is something that we've got to do across the board, just with all our practices. Quality improvement is something that you may have picked up, and it might not be that it's something you're standardising against that. You might just be going, well, actually, you know, the patients aren't getting their medication at the time. How can we improve that?
Yeah.
And then you do that, and then basically you're running an audit project. It's the same.
Oh,
It
okay.
is.
So I can always follow that up again. How do you prove that you've done a second when you just write it up?
You guys are, yeah, get something to say you're doing. Register with obviously.
I registered that.
Register with the department as an audit.
You get
Your CV.
So I can go back to that previous question. It's possible to do I know it's okay.
Well, we'll put
Yes, portfolio is very stressful because also you don't know what to just bring points after that.
It's, you know what, please don't let it stress you out, because if you are doing this for a very long time and it's just, you know, just take it a bit at a time. It's not worth getting that stressed, but it's worth being a bit clever about it and seeing what you can get the most points for where, because there are going to be things that actually apply to a few of the domains. So
But I guess you should always go for the highest one you can for that section. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
hello.
Hi, I really enjoyed your talk, and I just have a question. I'm a med student, not from the UK, from Europe and Romania. Okay, and do you know if it is possible during residency to come here and do like some rotations or I'm not sure how the system works. And I know it's possible to go in other countries in Europe, but I don't know about the UK.
We do have, well, basically, we have non-UK doctors come and do clinical attachments. Obviously, it's not paid through, so you will be doing, I don't know, your foundation year somewhere else, for instance, and then you might take a 2-week holiday or a month holiday and then come and be with us. What it means is just write to the department, just finding somebody and just sort of say, well, I'm interested in this. Would it be possible to be a clinical attachment student, so you'd be working? And then you basically get to follow the team around, see what they do, learn breaks, and that's what people do before they get to their apps, things like that. They quite often do that for review jobs, and it is unpaid initially, and then they move into that way. But yes, it is possible.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah, no, thank you again.
Well, I hope it's useful. I'm just...
Oh no, of course, yeah. Well, because you detailed everything. That was good. So I wrote on the CV building slide, you said about extracurriculars,
Yes.
and they're really good. I'm assuming you're referring to sort of volunteering activities and all of this.
I am talking
Okay.
about who plays musical instruments.
That was exactly my question. So I'm a, yeah, yeah.
Who does anything
Okay.
else? Who plays the football team?
Okay.
You know, all that sort of thing. They want to see that you're well-rounded.
I see.
person.
Okay, yeah.
Choose people to be in our specialty. I want somebody who in 10 years' time, I'm going to go, I would like them as my colleague. You don't want the person who's just done research,
Yeah.
nothing else in their life, and done that. You want the person who can interact with people, who will be a good colleague, who is supportive, who would be empathic when, say, your dad dies and you need someone to pick up the pieces because you're not there at work.
Yeah.
You want that person, okay? So being a surgeon is not just about these two box exercises, which
Good.
I hate. But
That's great to
you
hear.
want to do it, but do all the other things. Yes. There will be somewhere on there. It's different for surgical training. So I would go through the HEE and look through the process because they have changed it slightly. There is a place for registered biosurgical training. They want to know about, say, roles of responsibility, other activities you've done. Cardiothoracic would like to know what those things are. And so there is one that I think I know I know better use clarity. So I'm going to do a course learning I mean, there's obviously the e-portfolio foundation year students use, and I think some core trainees use as well, which is something that you just do as junior doctors. As medical students, what I would say is I would just get yourself a folder and some documents, and you know, if you get things signed off which you've done extra on top of your med school stuff, so say you've done a clinical attachment somewhere during your holidays, get a letter from somebody. God, I write this all the time.
Do you need to have some kind of proof for every single? I mean, so yes, but do you ever get asked to show it? Is my question.
They want you to upload it. So my job as a specialty trainee recruiter, I went down to Southampton because the Wessex Deanery do this for cardiothoracics. We spent an entire day. There were 20 cardiothoracic surgeons looking through something like 100 and something portfolios, and people have put their application in, and then you've got to double check their evidence.
Yeah, I see. Okay, okay, so it's really, really.
It's real.
Okay.
You have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And then it gets
yeah,
signed by
absolutely.
the-
Yeah.
Also,
It's useful to say what you've actually done and experienced. Just say I've done clinical attachment. Anybody can do that and then get them to sign it. It's useful to say, you know, I've spent time in the water with juniors. I've, you know, done this. I've maybe done some skills. Blah blah blah. Blah. So get some details because then people go, okay. I mean, we had some from overseas, and obviously they got the gist of the fact that they had to provide evidence, which was literally a line from some professor in surgery in, I don't know, Syria going, yes, this person spent this long with me. And you're like, well, what do they do? Did they make the tea? Did they, you know, what happened? So, yeah, so it's important to sort of be a bit more specific about it. Yeah.
Great. All right, thank you so much.
Right. Okay, thank you for your yes. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So just everything for that. But I think if you've been involved in the case, whether it's you watching or whether it's I would get cases because it's going to look amazing. And then you have that the letter. And let's say you don't have to have patient demographics because you can't have identifiers, obviously, because of patient confidentiality. But just have the initial patient. So it might be like CP, you know, cabbage times 4 on this stage, this surgeon, what your role was in it. It's very simple, just an Excel spreadsheet, typically, and then you can upload that and have it formally done, and then you can even potentially get the surgeon to sign off at the end of the placement. Something else. Okay, thank you. Hello.
So you mentioned about the surgical program.
Yes.
Started that since my second year.
Okay.
And I have suspected I've heard that it doesn't really you want to use all the
So what they want to do is see the engagement. What I would say is it could be then for your foundation years. So that's what each step of the way is looking to the next bit. So for the core training, it's going to be what you have done in your why. But the stuff that you do now is a good basis for that, and it does stand you good stead for the foundation year stuff.
But so when it comes to the actual CSC portfolio, does it actually count?
Probably doesn't count, but I think you would submit the evidence, and they would see that from medical school you were there. So I don't think half of it. But what I will say is that the cut-off will present the season.
So that's portion from FY.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it as well for the research project. That it has to be like kind of surgical related.
It doesn't have to be surgical. I'm just talking about surgical because I'm a surgeon and you're here to do surgery. But I mean, equally, if you did a project with, say, the respiratory team and then you decided you want to do thoracic surgery, if it's applicable, then that's fine.
But if it's for like CSC where you're just getting into like a surgical like training in general, would it have to, like for example, I did this project in my second year where we're like teaching primary kids about the primary school progress.
That's so cute.
As part of our school project, we actually presented like a poster presentation in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that actually counts towards anything because it's not.
Yes, it would. And I think you should keep that there and try and score some points with it, because it might be that they sort of say, well, how many posters have you done? You know, and you've done sort of 4 or 5, and maybe you haven't managed to get, say, an all presentation, you've just done posters, but actually you'll get some fun. So keep in mind everything you do. As I say, you're building as you go. It's not just all wham, it's foundation year, we've got to do all this for the next 2 years before we get to, you know, applications. You're starting now, you're starting there, but you can all count.
And as for the because I almost mentioned that we need like proof for everything.
Yeah.
But how would you like prove that you're involved in